Naomi Judd's death shocked the world, but it was the aftermath that left everyone gasping. The autopsy uncovered startling details that no one could have anticipated. Behind the smiles and country music hits, Naomi was hiding a battle so intense, even her closest family couldn't fully understand it. What happened in her final moments? And why did the autopsy reveal such disturbing truths, including a note that seemed to blame her daughter? It was a legacy no one saw coming. Let's take a deeper look into Naomi's life and the unseen pain she carried with her. Naomi Judd wasn't just a country music icon. She was the matriarch of what many called the first family of modern country. Her rise to fame was no accident. Born Diana Ellen Judd in 1946, Naomi worked as a nurse in Nashville before she ever dreamed of stepping onto a stage. Her big break came when she teamed up with her daughter, Winona. Together, their voices, Naomi's warmth and Wynonna's power, formed an unforgettable blend. They became the Judds, and with that, they dominated the music scene. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, the Judds released hit after hit, including Mama He's Crazy, Why Not Me, and Grandpa, Tell Me About the Good Old Days. These weren't just songs, they were anthems that fans clung to, music that spoke to them on a personal level. With over 20 million records sold and 5 Grammy Awards, the Judds were unstoppable. But the public face of country music wasn't all it seemed. Behind closed doors, the bond between Naomi and Wynonna was anything but perfect. Their relationship was complicated. Yes, there was love, but it was often overshadowed by tension, arguments, and silent gaps that stretched for months. The pressures of constant touring and the weight of their personal struggles made their connection volatile at times. Naomi's bond with her younger daughter, Ashley, wasn't much easier. Ashley, who carved out her own successful career in Hollywood, has openly discussed the emotional chaos she grew up with. She once described her childhood as a roller coaster of instability. Behind Naomi's public smile, she was struggling. Throughout her life, Naomi wrestled with severe mental health issues, including depression and anxiety. Later, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. She didn't hide it, which was rare among her peers. She was vocal about her struggles, but knowing about the pain wasn't the same as escaping it. Naomi's emotional health was fragile, and it only became more evident as the years wore on. In 1991, Naomi retired from performing after being diagnosed with hepatitis C, a disease she likely contracted during her nursing years. Her doctors predicted she'd have only a few years left, but Naomi defied the odds. She went into remission and became an advocate for mental health. She wrote books, gave speeches, and kept pushing for greater awareness. But even as she helped others, she couldn't help herself. Then, in 2022, Naomi made a surprising comeback. She and Wynonna announced a farewell tour, a final celebration of their legacy. For fans, it was a moment of joy. But for Naomi, it may have been the pressure she wasn't ready for. The tour was announced just weeks before her tragic death. Those close to her later spoke of how overwhelmed, erratic, and emotionally drained she seemed in the weeks leading up to her passing. But no one expected what happened next. Just one day before Naomi and Wynonna were to be inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame, Naomi was found dead in her home. The news rocked the music world, but it was what came afterward that left everyone stunned. When the autopsy report was released, it confirmed the devastating truth. Naomi Judd had taken her own life. But the report didn't just state the obvious. It revealed intimate, shocking details that painted a far darker picture than anyone could have imagined. The report was both clinical and heartbreaking. Naomi was found at home by her family on April 30th, 2022, at 10:57 a.m. She was transported to the hospital, but it was too late. She was pronounced dead just hours later, at 12:35 p.m. The next day, she was supposed to be inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame. The world had no idea she was struggling so deeply, so privately. The autopsy itself was filled with technical details that were almost too hard to read. The wound to her head was described in painstaking precision, a path through the brain's emotional and decision-making areas. But beyond the cause of death, it was the state of Naomi's body and the items surrounding her that told a deeper, more troubling story. Her attire suggested she had been at home, alone, and there were no signs of any struggle, indicating no foul play. But the most startling revelation came in the form of a handwritten note, allegedly addressed to her daughter, Winona. The report suggested that Naomi's final moments were marked by a letter that seemed to place blame on Winona. What could have led to such a heartbreaking farewell? Why would Naomi, on the verge of such an incredible honor, feel compelled to end her life? The physical details of Naomi's body were also shocking. The autopsy revealed numerous cosmetic procedures, from a facelift to eyelid surgery, and tattoos around her eyebrows and lips. Naomi had always been known for her beauty, but what the report unveiled suggested that beneath her public appearance, there was much more going on. She had also had breast implants, confirming that the image she presented was not just one of success, but of constant self-maintenance. The world saw a woman who had everything, but the truth was far more complicated. Naomi's story is one of profound sadness and unspoken struggles. The public image she crafted for herself was one of resilience and grace, but behind that image was a woman in constant pain, hiding her battles from the world. And now, after her death, we're left to ask, what could have been done differently? What was the cost of that perfect image? And what did Naomi take with her when she left the world behind? Her legacy is forever changed. The truth, as difficult as it is to face, is now out there for all to see. At a glance, Naomi Judd's body seemed to tell a familiar story of a performer who had spent a lifetime in the public eye, her appearance meticulously maintained, even as she approached her late 70s. A tummy tuck scar stretched across her hip, with additional markings on her knees, suggesting past surgeries. Her nails carefully manicured and painted with French tips, and her toenails softly pink, created the image of someone who still cared deeply about her image. But as we dig deeper, we realize the true complexity of her final days was hidden beneath these surface-level details. The substances found in Naomi's system paint a far different picture. Toxicology reports revealed a cocktail of psychiatric and neurological medications, each prescribed for conditions like depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety, and even Alzheimer's-related memory issues. Venlafaxine, trazodone, primidone, memantine, and MCPP were the names listed. Medications designed to manage mental health, seizures, and cognitive decline. They were not the kind of substances typically found in recreational settings, but rather prescribed with the intent to stabilize. Yet this powerful combination could also induce confusion, drowsiness, and emotional instability. It begs the question, did these medications, together, intensify Naomi's emotional struggles? In the months leading up to her passing, those closest to Naomi noticed troubling signs. Her behavior seemed increasingly erratic, and her emotional state, once a beacon of warmth for her fans, was now overshadowed by exhaustion and volatility. The pressure to return to the stage, despite her fragile health and emotional state, seemed to trigger a crisis. A farewell tour had just been announced, and she was about to be honored by the music world. But perhaps that spotlight, once a symbol of triumph, now felt overwhelming. One of the most haunting elements of Naomi's passing was the discovery of a note. The contents have never been fully disclosed, but it was widely reported that the note contained reflections that seemed to target her daughter, Winona. Fans had long viewed the mother-daughter duo as inseparable, and this revelation stirred shock and disbelief. Could the final words from Naomi, a woman who had built a legacy of love and strength, truly carry such pointed private criticisms? The notion that Naomi's last message might have been directed toward her own flesh and blood felt unfathomable to many. But beyond the toxicology reports and whispered controversies, one thing remains clear. Naomi Judd was in immense pain. She had fought bipolar disorder for years and had endured the painful legacy of hepatitis C, along with chronic lung inflammation that made singing an increasingly difficult task. The pressure to return to the stage, while balancing the weight of her personal struggles, was too much. A legend, caught between the battle for her health and the desire to return to what she loved most, was suddenly lost. But why? Why, just as she was about to be honored and celebrated, did it all unravel? These are the questions that linger in the quiet spaces of her legacy, unanswered and perhaps unknowable. For Naomi Judd, the grief was compounded by a deep sense of survivor's guilt. "I miss her, but we just don't talk," Naomi shared, reflecting the emotional distance that had defined their relationship in the years leading up to Naomi's death. Fans had always known Naomi as a public figure brimming with warmth and openness, but behind closed doors, their connection was not as flawless as it appeared. Despite decades of touring together, the bond that once felt unbreakable had started to fray. Naomi now carried the weight of not just losing her mother, but of grappling with the reality that she had not spoken to Naomi in weeks before her passing. There was no grand argument, no explosive falling out, just a gradual drift that neither mother nor daughter seemed able to bridge. The silence was deafening. Naomi's grief was unique, more complex than most could understand. She described it not as a single moment of loss, but as a slow unraveling. Her thoughts often returned to a quiet, almost surreal image of Naomi, still imagining her mother at home, possibly wondering where she was and what she was doing. "I think she misses the road," Naomi said, speaking with a vulnerability that most hadn't seen in the public eye. Naomi's love for the stage, for the crowds, for the attention, was something that Naomi recognized deeply. Yet she felt an uncomfortable contrast in herself. Always more introverted, more focused on family and music than public life. Being in a mother-daughter duo was unlike any other familial bond, Naomi once explained. It wasn't just about being family. It was about working together, performing together, living in close quarters for years. That intense closeness can either forge an unshakable bond or create unbearable tension. Naomi struggled with how to mourn someone who had not only been a mother, but also a co-worker, a business partner, and a performer. There were no final words, no closing moments of peace or resolution. And in the absence of closure, moving forward seemed almost impossible. Yet Naomi did her best to honor Naomi's memory. She continued to sing their songs, speak out about mental health, and even commit to finishing the farewell tour that they had planned together. Privately, however, the grieving process remained far more complicated. She described her emotional isolation as profound, a quiet loneliness that few understood. In one of the most poignant moments of her mourning, Naomi simply said, "I didn't expect to cry." In that quiet admission, the weight of her loss and the complexity of their relationship were laid bare. Just as Naomi was beginning to find a way through her grief, tragedy struck again. Her husband, musician Cactus Moser, experienced a sudden medical event that left him unable to use the left side of his body. The change was swift and dramatic. Once a lively presence on stage, Cactus now required assistance just to move from room to room. It was a stunning reversal, and for Naomi, it meant stepping into the role of caregiver almost overnight. The physical, emotional, and psychological toll was staggering. But in the midst of this new crisis, Naomi's words resonated deeply. "We're supposed to be doing this at 80, not now." It was a moment of raw honesty, revealing not just the burden of illness, but the profound weight of lost time and unexpected change. Life, it seemed, had rewritten their plans once again. It's been a journey like no other for Naomi Judd. She's faced down the unimaginable and somehow kept moving forward. But the path she now walks is vastly different from the glittering stage she once commanded. It's been a quiet revolution, one where strength isn't measured in applause, but in the small daily acts of care and resilience. She's now a caregiver, a role she never thought she'd play. Her husband, Cactus Moser, the man who was once her partner in life and music, has found himself in a battle with his own body after a devastating injury. But here's the thing about Cactus. Even in the face of incredible odds, he never let himself be defined by his limitations. Despite the doctor's doubts, he shocked everyone, including himself, by getting back on the ski slopes, navigating trails with only one working leg. There's something about the sheer determination to keep going, to never accept the word can't, that defines this couple. Yet, for Winona, the public still sees the performer. They see her on stage, flashing her smile, singing love songs and giving interviews, never fully understanding the weight of what's happening behind closed doors. What they don't see is the exhaustion, the emotional toll, the long nights when she's lifting her husband out of bed or managing doctor appointments. But she doesn't complain. She never asks for sympathy. As she puts it, this isn't about strength, it's about necessity. She's not looking for applause, she's just surviving, one day at a time. But there's something else lurking beneath the surface of this family story, an undercurrent of silence between Winona and her sister, Ashley Judd. The two have been physically close, living on the same stretch of land in Tennessee, but emotionally, they couldn't be farther apart. There's no animosity, no big fallout, but years of emotional distance have created an undeniable divide. The absence of their mother, Naomi, who tragically passed away, has only deepened that divide. Many assumed that after such a profound loss, the sisters would come together, but instead, they revealed that they barely speak. Even though they share a piece of property, their lives are on separate tracks, lived at different speeds. Winona, a mother of two, rooted in domestic life, has her hands full with raising teenagers, taking care of her disabled husband, and managing the complexities of her own grief. Ashley, on the other hand, is single, child-free, and continues to live a jet-set lifestyle, traveling the world as a humanitarian and actress. The contrast couldn't be more glaring, and neither sister seems to have found a way to bridge that gap. When asked about their relationship, Winona put it simply, "The only thing we share is a missing father and a broken mother." There's no room for reconciliation in that sentence, only the acknowledgement of a shared but fractured history. And the story of their family's emotional turmoil goes deeper. Winona learned later in life that the man she believed to be her father wasn't. This secret, one that Naomi kept from her for years, caused a deep sense of betrayal and shook Winona's sense of identity. Ashley, by contrast, knew the truth much earlier. This difference in their personal histories created an emotional imbalance that neither has ever fully addressed. The pain of that realization still lingers, and it's one of the many reasons they remain distant. Publicly, they both grieve the loss of their mother, but in their own ways. Their story is one of endurance, of trying to navigate fame, loss, and trauma under the harsh glare of public scrutiny. It's not about bitterness or rivalry, it's about survival. Both sisters have found different ways to cope with their pain, but the emotional walls between them are still too high to climb. Will they ever find a way back to each other? Only time will tell. As we close this chapter on Winona and Ashley, we can't help but reflect on the lessons learned through their struggles. Life doesn't always follow the path we expect. Sometimes, the greatest strength is in just continuing, even when the world tells you to stop. It's about showing up, even when you don't have the energy, and finding a way to keep moving forward, no matter how heavy the load. Stay tuned for more stories like this, where we dive deep into the lives of Hollywood's biggest stars. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, to stay updated on the latest in celebrity news.